in a couple days you're going to be on a trip soon, and you're going to be gone for a little bit. Where are you headed?
Yes, it's actually late tomorrow night that I'm leaving, and it is Bhutan. Yeah, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. Well, so I
Yeah.
know because I took a look at your Instagram. You
Hmm.
have you have a few places that you've been to
Yeah.
within a pilgrimage capacity.
Yeah.
Nepal, Japan, Santa Fe, New
Yeah.
Mexico. Is this a
Yeah.
part of that kind of
Yeah.
action? Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that pilgrimage is like one of my main spiritual practices. And there's a group that I travel with. And we share the same teacher, Geshe Tenzin Zopa. And once a year we get together in a different country, usually in Asia, and it's always been in Asia. And he offers teachings, and we visit sacred sites. And then I've also done some of my own kind of pilgrimaging, like in Santa Fe. And then when I went to Mount Maya in Japan, that was my own like personal trip. The trip that I'm going on tomorrow is part of this larger group and trip.
And your teacher will be present with you on that trip?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I'll be there
wow.
teaching. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Is there something in particular that you're set up to see, like on the itinerary, that's like that things are kind of built around, or is this something where you'll be kind of stopping at a few different places of interest?
We'll be going to many places. So Bhutan is, a tantric kingdom. It's a Vajrayana, the last, I think, tantric Vajrayana kingdom, and it's also a place where Padmasambhava, the very famous Tibetan adept, like visited and meditated in caves there. So it's sort of like I think the pilgrimage is being framed as like we're going to the land of Padmasambhava, and we'll be in sites associated with him, and of course the Fierce Nest Monastery. So yeah, we'll be going to a lot of different places.
And when it comes to like gearing up and preparing for that, other than like
Um,
luggage and passports and all that good stuff,
mhm.
uh, I'd imagine because you had said that like part of your undertaking of pilgrimage has a spiritual element to it, or
Yeah,
that's one of the ways that you kind of manifest or express your practice. Uh,
yeah.
what goes into the practice element of preparing for
Mm,
for a pilgrimage, and then
hmm.
is there any kind of study or academic kind of quality to it
Mm.
that you also weave in?
Yeah. So when I was an undergraduate at Bates College back in 2000, uh, I wrote my senior thesis on a late fourth century early Christian pilgrimage text. And I got a grant to travel and recreate the path of this particular pilgrimage text. It was an early Christian nun. So I was 20 years old and I went to Israel and Palestine and Turkey and like went to all of these sites. And the theme of the pilgrimage, the theme of the thesis was about so the novel, which is written in epistolary form, like the text, is written as a series of letters from the nun. Her name was Agaria to her sisters, and there was some debate over whether they were nuns or whether they were like her like sisters. And so the theme of my thesis was about sacred space and what happens with sacred space and how we connect to it. And the idea was that like by writing these letters, reflecting the experience of the sacred back to the sisters who couldn't be there, that it enhanced Agaria herself's experience the sacred site. And so then I didn't really do anything with pilgrimage for like 20 years. And then I was invited to go on. So Dr. Miles Neal is the person who runs and organizes these trips and has brought many Buddhist practitioners into the path of pilgrimage. He's like really spearheaded it for us. And he's the one who partners with Geshe Tenzin Zopa to create these trips year after year, and might be a good person that you might want to talk to. But he invited me to go on a pilgrimage to Nepal in 2018. And that is where I met Geshe Tenzin Zopa for the first time. And it was very poignant because I actually took the backpack that I'd taken as a 20-year-old, you know what I mean? To whatever. And then it was an amazing experience. So there was an academic component for me because there was this origin back when I thought I was going to be like a professional student of religion. I have a graduate degree in world religion, and I thought I was going to become a professor. But the path wound up being like a path of practice for me as opposed to like a path of study in that way. And so there was like kind of this long lead up to going on pilgrimage. And then I have to say, like my first, I mean, as you can see from my Instagram, I don't have many followers. I haven't really put any effort into like reaching people as I perhaps should. And but I really got into Instagram on the next pilgrimage we did in 2020. 2022, the first post-pandemic one, and that's when I started documenting along the way. And so that like that's actually on my other Instagram account that's private. And I actually was living the experience that I thought that this nun was having, that I found that taking pictures of the sites and writing these captions and think, for people who couldn't be there actually enhanced my experience of like connecting to the sacred site. So there's that very kind of interesting thread in that way. And then these days, because we've been doing it every year since 2022, and then I've also done other pilgrimages to Santa Fe, I would say the preparation is usually more from my side in terms of like the framing the intention for myself of like what I am seeking to cultivate on the particular trip, and like through meditation. And I don't always research or worry too much about the history of the sites in advance as perhaps I should. Like we're very fortunate that when we go on these organized trips, it's sort of prepared for us. This information is prepared for us. So I really just go and I'm trying to, connect to the space like in a very meditative way. So that's how I go about doing it.
Yeah, I really I love the connection to what you had studied and to
Yeah.
have that experience where uh you're recognizing firsthand that impact of what the sharing of the pilgrimage does as far as like the meaning of it, visiting the sacred sites is one thing, and then the sharing of it, that connection that you can get, and
Yeah.
how you explored that through Instagram is really, it's really cool, and especially how like you really sat with that kind of material too, like you really, it was not something that you kind of read in passing. You really sat with it, and now you're actually really finding it alive and well in what you're doing. That's really fantastic. And then when it comes to just the the switch, I don't know if it is a switch or if
Mm,
it's like a what is the one where you kind of like you glide it up when it kind of turns a different color? I don't know what I'm doing right now, but the LED kind of thing.
yeah.
When it becomes pilgrimage for you, when is that? Like,
Uh,
is it when you're on the
yeah.
bus to a spot,
Yeah.
or when you're trip
Yeah.
going to the airport?
The minute you sign up for the trip, we're in it right now. You're part of it.
All
When
right.
you asked me to do this, I was like, I wanted to do it before the trip because I thought it would be a really interesting part of this particular pilgrimage to have an opportunity to reflect with another practitioner from a different lineage about this and the journey of practice, before going and like doing it. So yeah, so from the minute you sign up, like the journey has started. And yeah, and then like every challenge and obstacle you navigate like along the way to get to the place, because they're always hard, they're never easy. There's always challenges like every single time. And yeah, so like then that becomes a frame of like, you know, it's all becoming part of the practice.
Yeah, I I appreciate that too, because like even if you happen to live locally to the pilgrimage site, there are in various religious traditions there is this effort that's made that has to
Yes.
be, that's very clear about the intention of the pilgrimage. So
Yes.
you might live within 50 miles of the site, but you're walking, or
Yes.
you're doing different things that are a little like
Yes.
more internal and reflective as well. And
Absolutely.
what I really like too, just briefly on this, is that your Instagram, um, that is public. You have documented various elements
Mhm.
of your trips, and
Mhm.
highlighting significant things, highlighting significant things that are for you, your history, your practice, but also
Mhm.
just like they are relics or icons and artistic motifs and various things like that that are really
Mhm.
important. But the way that you have just shared it just now in reflection of what the nun had been writing is that you have a lot of
Mhm.
intention in the post. You have a lot of like, well,
Yeah.
I'm doing this to share an experience more than just kind of like, well, I had this for dinner. Look at this blurry picture
Yes.
of a sunset, like the various things
Yes.
like that. So
Yes. Yes.
I
Yeah.
I really appreciate you
Yeah.
having that kind of focus on it. Um,
Yeah.
and then when it comes to one of your initial pilgrimage experiences,
Mhm.
because it sounds like you met a teacher through that, which is pretty,
Yeah.
which can be a pretty profound experience for a lot of
Yeah.
people. I was wondering what that experience was like for you.
Yeah. It was very profound. It's so funny once you get into the topic of teachers and people's connections to their teachers, like in the Dharma, I feel like you hear amazing stories, like so many different things happen. But I had been debating whether or not to go on the trip, and I had gone through like a recent loss. And as part of the preparation for the trip, we'd been given, I think, the link, or at least the title of a documentary film that was about Geshe Tenzin Zopa called Unmistaken Child, which is actually about his search to find the reincarnation of his master who had passed away. So it opens with the they show the whole cremation, of his teacher, and then he's sort of assigned the role as this young monk. This was back in the early, I think it was maybe 2004, of going out and his search to find the unmistaken child who is the reincarnation of his teacher, who he did in fact find and then raised. And he became a monk and is now is in a monastery in India and is, I think, in his early 20s, and is becoming a teacher in his own right. And so I was very impacted by this movie, which many people are. And I was like, I want to go meet this teacher, so I'm going to go on this trip. I can't say that the mission of the pilgrimage for that trip for me initially was Nepal. It was really to like meet that particular teacher. And so it was a very interesting way to meet a teacher because, you meet them on the screen, but, at the point that I went in, 2018, that movie was already, 14, 15 years. I mean, he's already an older, man than he was, like he was a young man. And so you're capturing a particular time, and then you're sort of comparing the person that you're meeting in person who's teaching you to this, parasocial relationship, or whatever they call it when you're relating to the film. And so, I think they always talk about in the Dharma that like part of taking on a teacher is checking them. I think that the advice you always hear, at least in Tibetan Buddhism, is you always hear like investigate the teacher for 12 years. I don't know if they talk about that in Zen, but there's some text that gets referred to that I can't quote. But you hear this all the time in oral teachings of like 12 years. And I think some people mean it can be taken literally, but I think it also can be taken as a metaphor to like thoroughly examine the teacher. And so interestingly, part of my process of examining my particular teacher was starting with a film and then kind of comparing the person in person and then getting to have a one-on-one conversation with him that was very powerful. And yeah.
Yeah, that's so. It's cool that you got to have a window into an earlier 12-year, like the like a early
Yeah.
years of that experience, and then have be able to actually you had that screen, those kind of more Zoom or Skype experiences, and then to finally in person meet. You got to have
Hmm.
that investigation process.
Yeah.
Had you always been drawn to Vajrayana, or were there other elements of Buddhism that had been speaking to you, or other elements of practice that had been speaking to you before that?
I think I was probably always drawn to the Vajrayana without knowing it. Like I can't say that. I mean, I got started in the Dharma in my early 20s. I got started in the Dharma because I was in graduate school studying world religion. Like I said, I thought I was going to be a professor. I was not there like as a practitioner. Then while I was there, the Dalai Lama came to speak. And in the early 2000s, like 90s, like Tibetan Buddhism, like there were all these movies about it, and that was, I think, the Dalai Lama was becoming so well known, and so I guess I had sort of as a teenager been like exposed to it, and then when I was an undergraduate and studying religion as an undergraduate student, I went to a small college and our classes would be quite small. So, like in my senior religion research seminar, there were seven of us. And one of them was, I think two people had studied abroad in like Nepal or India and were pursuing Tibetan Buddhism. And you often find this in like Tibetan Buddhism in the US is like you meet people who started as like a study abroad student and they were like academically interested, but they also became practitioners. It's sort of this combined thing. So it was definitely like around, and it was around like my first religion class in college. It wasn't about Tibetan Buddhism, but it was more of a survey class. But they definitely talked about the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And I remember sitting in that class as 18-year-old and being like, wow, they figured everything out. They even figured out like the dying process. So I think it just like my karma was very drawn like to Tibetan Buddhism. And when I started getting more serious about the Dharma, I visited a couple of different centers, but I have this theory. Part of what draws us is like the aesthetics, like that Westerners wind up in different branches of Buddhism. Like, the elegance of Zen is so profound and powerful, where so much is said with something that seems so minimal, like I'm thinking of like the Enzo. And so I think there's like that works for a particular mind, and then with Tibetan Buddhism, you have more of an Indic tradition. So there's a lot going on, like, do you know what I mean? Like visually. And yeah, for some reason it just grabbed me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was wondering this too, because I
Hmm.
know that you have a private practice where you are a
Hmm.
mental health counselor and professional, and
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
employ psychotherapy and
Hmm.
hypnotherapy into your work.
Hmm.
And I was wondering if there are, um, well, I mean, that are at least like things that you can see reflective of Tibetan Buddhism within the the methods that you use with clients. And not to say
Yes.
that you purpose,
Yes.
I don't know if you blend a lot of
Yeah.
secular sectarian things with clients, but like just seeing if there are things that you can see that are have a connection or a tether to it.
Yes. Interestingly, it's only recently when I started teaching more meditation that and because I've been a hypnotherapist for 10 years. And it's so funny, but it's like only recently that teaching visualization based meditation that I was like, oh my God, this is no different than hypnosis. This is actually in many ways like the same thing, because what you're doing in tantric type meditation is like invoking, I mean, the visualization is visual, but it's the felt experience, the smells, the tastes, like you're really engaging all of the senses. And that's the same thing that happens in hypnosis, like in hypnotherapy, that you're trying to help people heal by like evoking a felt sense experience, like in the hypnosis, is one way to sort of like go about it. So it's funny, but it's like I was doing these two things separately, and then they kind of intersected at some point. So it wasn't like I'm doing hypnosis because it is similar to the tradition I'm in. It's like I was sort of doing these two things independently and then realized like, wow, they're the same thing, And like I remember learning particular meditations like 10 years ago and being like, then learning hypnosis and being like, these feel kind of the same. So I think there's a lot of overlap in that internal experience.
Yeah, and then once you started to appreciate the connection between the two, I mean, did it do anything for your practice? Did it do anything, or
Mm,
your personal spiritual practice, or did it do anything in particular for the ways that you engage with clients? Did you notice like
mm.
was there a noticeable difference between like the pre and the post kind of realization of that
Yeah.
connection?
I think it gave me a lot more confidence in the hypnosis that I was doing. So like when I got started in hypnotherapy, I had some conflicted feelings about it because I'd been to Dharma teachings where teachers had referred to like, in day-to-day life, we're just walking around in trance all of the time. We have to wake up. So the language of hypnosis would be invoked as like a problem, you know? They mean it differently, than like hypnotherapy. So I think I had this assumption for a long time that like hypnosis and meditation were like two different things. And if I spent too much time using trance, and I didn't, I did a lot of hypnotherapy with people, but ironically, I have experienced hypnotherapy for myself, but I haven't done a ton of it. And I think I was worried that it's like you're training yourself to trance out and it would like not help your meditation or it would harm your ability to meditate. And then I started to realize that the people that I did hypnotherapy with that were meditators were the best hypnosis patients. They had the most vivid experience, they got the most out of it, like they were able to get into it like really quickly. And so it made me like much more trusting of the modality like of hypnosis. And I never really suggest it to clients. Like I only do hypnotherapy with people that request it, that are like interested in it, because it's just been my experience that like it really only is effective if it's something you're excited about and interested in, because there's that whole notion that there's just so many notions about hypnotherapy that are inaccurate and like come from popular culture. But even if people know that those things aren't logically true, if on a subtle level or an unconscious level they have those concerns. So like when people are excited and they really want to try hypnosis and they're curious about it and they're kind of adventurous, it's going to work the best for them. So but realizing these kind of overlap did give me a lot more confidence in terms of using it when people wanted to do it.
I uh I think that that's a wonderful thing to have that kind of understanding that people not everyone might be not be like ready for it, or
Yeah.
if they're not willing and excited and like interested in it, then to
Yeah.
impose it wouldn't really work, because you have to be
Yeah.
game, or you have to be like
Yeah.
available to answer some of those questions, or to plumb those depths in a certain way. And I feel
Totally.
like similar with like meditation, it's really
Yes.
as many headspace apps there are, as many different TED Talks there are about how important it is to for 10 minutes a day just sit and do breath work. You can't make somebody do it because it just
No.
won't work. It just won't work like
No.
that.
No, and it's sort of like I was one of the things I appreciate about your podcast because when I was looking at it, I was like, wow, he's getting people from lineages of Buddhism that I didn't even know existed. Like last year we went to Japan and we got to experience Shingon Buddhism, which was really cool and amazing. But I like that I love that there are so many different paths and that there are so many ways to practice because we have so many different kinds of minds and you can't really predict what's going to be the right match for somebody. Somebody has to figure that out for themselves. So I really enjoy that the Buddha taught so many different methods because there are so many different minds. And yeah, you have
Yeah.
to want it.
Certainly, certainly, and I appreciate that what you do. I mean, you're making something accessible for people that should they want it, should they be available to it, or kind of predisposed to it, or whatever, agreeable to that type of treatment, like the
Hmm.
hypnotherapy. It's wonderful that
Hmm.
you have that as something in your tool belt that you can kind of
Yeah.
employ and work with. And then I had, so this might be a little heady, and I'm still kind of
Hmm.
trying to phrase the question in my mind here,
Mm,
but it has to do with trance,
mm,
and that is
hmm.
when I think in an article, either it was a
Hmm.
blog on your website or it was a
Hmm.
Tricycle article, but you were talking about the trance state, and that
Hmm.
being something similar where you're kind of shining a light on how common it is as an experience,
Hmm.
where
Yeah.
if you're driving on traffic or something like that, uh,
Hmm.
you could be in a trance state and miss your exit, or all of a sudden
Hmm.
you're at your exit and you just kind of wake
Hmm.
up to it, and then you take your turn off the highway. Um,
Hmm.
and then just what you were saying earlier about uh, within Vajrayana lineages, maybe some, not all, but there's one that more or less says that we are walking in this trance, maybe illusion quality,
Hmm.
where we're not really quite
Hmm.
awake.
Hmm.
And yet there's this trance quality to meditation where you're maybe
Hmm.
more or less keying into
Hmm.
uh, quote unquote reality or something deeper. I was
Hmm.
just wondering about like how can we navigate between the illusory or the illusionary trance state versus this more locked in meditative quality trance state? I'm just kind of curious about sussing out those two, because it seems like
Yeah.
they both do a similar physiological thing to somebody, but one is more
Yeah.
real than the other, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, wow, that is so deep. I mean, so I was just in New York last week and I went to this workshop with a couple of Dharma siblings, Michael Katz on dream yoga. And he was, and they talk about this like in Tibetan Buddhism, and I'm sure it must be a universal Buddhist idea, but that like life is a dream. Like what we think is solid and real is like, existence is like a dream. And so Michael Katz asked us like, are you awake right now? Do you think you're awake? Or do you think are you dreaming right now? And so like I guess, I mean I'm new to it, but that's kind of like the practice of Dharma is like trying to wake up and realize what's an illusion or not. So that holds like deep side of things I've certainly not figured out yet at all. But yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if this will answer your question, but I think like in terms of the state of hypnosis or hypnotic trance, which is a state of heightened awareness where there's this kind of hyper focus actually, but at the same time you're less aware of other things. So you might be completely absorbed in the imagery in your mind, but you're not paying attention to your body or what else is like going on around you. Or which is what happens in highway hypnosis. You're driving and you're lost in thought, and then you look up and you're like at your and it shows this interesting separation like of the mind because somehow the body is still driving. You stayed in the lane, you didn't drift off the road, you didn't hit anybody, and you remembered to look up and like look for your stop. And so from the perspective of hypnotherapy, that state, I mean, and I've often said to people, because meditators and artists seem to be people that do really, really well with hypnosis. And I was saying to a potential new client recently, like, have you ever noticed that? Because I was explaining the state of hypnosis, and I was like, and they're like, oh yeah, that happens to me like all the time. And I was like, have you ever noticed that your best ideas come in that state? And they're like, yeah, you know, because it can be this very creative, dynamic like state actually. So from the perspective of hypnotherapy, mm, it's being harnessed with intention for the purpose of healing. And then I'm not going to be so bold as to call what happens in tantric or any other kind of meditation like trance. And I'm not well educated on like, because it says in the text that the different samadhis and all the different levels of consciousness, and I'm not educated in like all of that. So I'm sure the internal states are very identifiable, based on text and learning. But in terms of the meditative state, let's say, then you're intentionally cultivating this state of mind for the purpose of benefiting all sentient beings, including yourself, for the purpose of enlightenment of yourself and all sentient beings. So I think it's like maybe a distinction between intentional trance and unintentional trance, and then what we do with it,
Yeah.
because we can have spontaneous visionary kind of trances for sure.
Yeah, like where all of a sudden you didn't necessarily intend to be in another world, or like a daydreaming, so to speak,
Yeah.
but it can spontaneously kind of grab you.
Yeah.
And thank you. I know that that was like a bigger question, and I think you certainly answered it, and I appreciate that, because it's just something that I think about, but I think that framing it within the terms of intention, I think, are really
Yeah.
helpful. And maybe there is um different experiences of reality, not one is more real than another, but like
Yeah.
there could be strata of how connected you are to different levels of it, maybe. um
Yeah.
and I wanted to talk, because you had mentioned your trip to Japan, and visiting the
Hmm.
Shingon,
Hmm.
and something that I noticed, that was a regular occurrence within your posts about the pilgrimage sites that you go to. Many of them had to deal with a Māyādevī book that you're putting
Yeah.
together. I wanted to ask you about that,
Yeah.
the origins of that, and how it's been going.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for asking. So it's such a long, extensive, it's like where to start. So the Maya Devi book got started in, I would say, in like 2020. So it got started in late 2019. I lost a baby, which I had posted about like on my Instagram. And that was a very profound experience. And then after that, my husband and I were in an adoption process that did not work out because of COVID. And so there was this time that I was sort of coming to terms with during COVID that I was not going to be a mother, like in this particular lifetime. And then at that time, my closest Dharma sibling came to visit me, and they brought me a gift. And it was this scroll of a Tonka painting. And I opened it up, and it's Maya Devi giving birth to the Buddha. And I had other friends that are like, that's a crazy gift to give a woman who just found out she's not going to have children. But I loved it. Actually loved it. And I couldn't really explain why, but it really spoke to me this profound way. And so we moved to Chicago, and I brought it with me, and I went to get it framed. And I remember the day that I brought it home, and it was framed, and it was the first time getting to see it, like laid out. And I just sat and meditated on this picture for like probably an hour. And I've never meditated on a piece of art before in my life. And I remember looking at it and having the realization that what I was looking at was not an ordinary childbirth. Certainly, if you read the sutras about the birth of the Buddha, it's not an ordinary birth by anybody's definition. But I actually felt that I was looking at something that was fundamentally tantric, which was not that, like, on a more abstract level. And you see me looking, because I'm actually looking at the Tonka while I'm talking to you. So that's where my gaze is directed. But what I was actually looking at was the act of divine creation, the creative dynamic force of something being born and coming into creation. And so I became very interested in who Māyādevī was, and like I started to research it. And as I learned about the story of the Buddha's birth and all of the symbolism in it, and then when I was in Japan, there is a mountain named after her that I hiked up, and I got to meet with the vice abbot of the temple on top, which has a famous statue of Māyādevī like in it, and that was a Shingon temple. And so as I like kind of continued pursuing her, not only did I learn so much more about the Dharma and the meaning of her and the meaning of wisdom in Buddhism, but also it really healed my grief and gave a lot of purpose and meaning to like my life as well. So the book is really kind of about this dual process of like both the figure of her, the story of her, who she is according to different sutras. mm, my sense of her is like a tantric figure, which is very non-traditional. Like that doesn't, and then also some of my story of like going through the process of like pursuing her.
Thank you for sharing so much, so
Hmm.
many personal elements. I mean, I know that this is a very important and significant element of your life and your story. So I appreciate your openness to going over it,
Yeah.
and how special that you were given this gift that maybe other friends might not um, have seen the connection for as being something that would have been so important for you, and yet here you are, sitting for an hour meditating on this very image. And what's powerful too is, I mean, like in that image, I can't see it, but I'm kind of imagining more or less the
Yeah.
scene of it, just the two of them, and the Buddha might capture the gaze as far as being the star of the show, considering within the context of Buddhism, but you don't get, but there are two figures, and there's a reason why both are
Yes.
included. And
Yes. Yeah.
there's something very important about the artistic portrayal, and also within the sutras and within the storytelling, that is like, this is Māyādevī, and like she is involved, and there's a reason for that, and there's something very special about not just the birth of the Buddha, but the birthing, the motherhood that made that
Yes.
happen. So there's something
Yeah.
very
Yeah. Yeah. The
powerful about all
sutras are
that.
very explicit about it too. Like she's like, in the Lalita Vistra, they're it's like there's certain qualities that the mother of a Buddha has to have. Like a bodhisattva in his last lifetime has a mother with like these qualities, and there was only one identified woman on the planet who had the qualifications to be the mother of the bodhisattva in the last lifetime in which he becomes the Buddha. So it's very specific.
Yeah. And in this book, I mean, I think that what you're working on, just like weaving in it's for the different interpretations of my Devi, but also incorporating elements of your story in it. I mean, it sounds like a very important book, and this is something that is very important for you. I mean, I know you've written for Tricycle. You wrote you've written a lot of different articles and pieces for them.
Yeah.
One of which being healing from miscarriage, and I know that also on Instagram you were talking about how October is pregnancy and infant loss awareness month, and just like,
Yeah.
your willingness to uh bring up a topic that is really difficult for people even just to hear is something that is, I think is going to really help a lot of people that are going through it, or that are also just raising their awareness to this element of life that goes on. I think it's
Yeah.
just really really important. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah.
A- and also too, I mean, just when it comes to your engagement with Maya Devi, because you've
Hmm.
seen her in Japan, and you've seen her
Yeah.
in the reliefs in Borobudur in Java.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what has that been like? Because I'd imagine there's a research
Yeah.
element to it as well. So you've kind of seen her in
Yes.
different iterations. So
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your attention to detail about all this stuff. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for bringing up the last part of it, because, yes, part of the reason I was happy to talk with you this month was in honor, because I assumed this topic would come up, and as part of like awareness raising for pregnancy and infant loss awareness, because these one of the things that I've learned by going through my own healing process, and I wrote about in the Tricycle article, and the more I hear from other women, their stories, is there is something about, I mean, I think this is true for grief and life in general, but really very specifically to losing children and losing pregnancies, is like so much healing comes from sharing stories. D- Um, so much healing comes from sharing stories, both sharing your own and also hearing other women like share it. I can't fully explain what kind of happens, but there's this sort of witnessing that just in of itself is like so powerful, like maybe even more than other stories I've heard people share, like as a but in terms of encountering Maya Devi in different places, I think it was an interesting process of always looking for the outer Maya Devi. Like, where am I going to really connect? Am I going to really, like, am I going to be standing in front of her in Borobudur and that's where I'm really going to feel the energy of her looking at this relief? Or is it going to be after I hike the mountain in Japan and I get up there and then will I really feel it? And actually, what I learned from that process was like, it's the inner Maya Devi that matters. I'm not going to find her in the outer way. It's like the inner journey. And so the outer that I can see is the representation of other people's inner journey, but I have to find the inner for myself. So I've now started to look at the outer representations as somebody else's inner that I can appreciate, but I can only find her like within. With the exception of the Tonka, like there's something about the Tonka, maybe because it was gifted to me so personally or came to me at this particular time or because the meditative experience, there is something that feels like my outer Maya Devi. But yeah, it's the inner that matters. And so I remember one story about this that I really like love is so when I got to go to Mount Maya, Mayazan Tenjoji is the actual name of the temple. And I remember asking the monk, the vice abbot at the temple, like, why is there like a statue of her? Because she's not really devoted to in a lot of the Dharma, like in a lot of Buddhist places. There's not a focus on her. Like, why is there a focus on her here? And I've been to Lumbini, like there's the Maya Devi temple there, but it's somehow different. You're not seeing like a statue of her in that way. At least I don't think so. I don't think I saw a statue of her there. And he said, well, in Japan, we're very interested in where people come from. So we like to know who their mother is, maybe more than India. And in that moment, like the ultimate emptiness of Maya Devi, that she is not existing from her own side, but that she exists in the context of like where she appears and how we relate to her, very Buddhist. It's like, oh, she is manifesting in this statue in this way because of the minds of Japanese people and how they're connecting to her. And then she, shows up in different places based on our own minds. And then interestingly, when I read the Ganda Vyuha, which is the sutra where she is a fully awakened Buddha in that sutra. And they talk about all of her qualities and they go at great length of talking about how she appears to the minds of sentient beings exactly how they need to appear based on their own karma and mind. So she appears in Japan in the way that they relate to, and she appears in India the way that she relates to, and for whatever reason she showed up in a Tanka like in the right form for me, the same way that we find our way to a Zen temple or a Buddhist monastery based on our mind and like what needs to, like kind of appear to us. So yeah, so it's like at the beginning of this journey, I also love art and I love like, relating to art and I do really love religious art from everything from the kitsch to the divine. I really enjoy it all. That part of like the history of religions I really loved. So I really loved seeing all of the different like depictions of her. And so at the beginning, I was very interested in like the outer, but as the book has gone on, as the journey has continued, it's the inner that feels like much more important to me.
I greatly appreciate what you're saying about when you're on these pilgrimages or when you're visiting these different sites and you go and you're trying to find that route to
Yes.
Māyādevī outside,
Yes.
like as
Yeah.
if
Where is it? Is it
yeah.
here? Yes. Is this the
Like
place? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And this is where all this understanding will become raining down on me, and I'll feel finally that
Yes.
I've like now
Yeah.
this is what I'm talking about. This is why I'm here.
Right.
And all
Right.
that
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
exactly. Like we do in meditation, this is the moment it's all going to happen. Yeah.
Right, right. Oh yeah. I mean, it's so relatable. And then, but what I appreciated a lot about what you're what you shared about your experience on those pilgrimages with that mindset is that once you start to recognize it as what you're seeing, the statuary, the relics, the reliefs, the different like artistic renderings and everything like that as expressions of other people's inner understandings of something, and then that's an invitation for you to like those are almost like doorways into your own understanding of something. And I think that that applies not just within understanding Māyādevī, just as a topic for me, just from what we're talking about. It feels like there's applicability with art in general. Like I thought of how Rothko, right? I think that that's the
Mm,
so
yeah, the
he's
abstract.
yeah, he's an incredible artist. And I've gone to museums and I've been like looked at those giant paintings with those just
Mm,
uh, very solid shapes and color patterns. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, all right, this guy's a genius. So there's something about this that's very intriguing. That there's a reason why people travel all over the world to go to this museum to go see this. And then I'll be, okay, and I don't quite feel it. And then I'll look at a Gerhard Richter painting, which I didn't know was going to be around the corner, and I'll just kind of like have a
yeah,
very deep
yeah,
reaction. And then I can look back at the Rothko and I'll see a little bit more about what, so there's a little bit of an inner journey happening where I can now understand a little bit more about what everyone's trying to get at here. Not to say that
yeah.
every artist is trying to say the same thing, but I just appreciated what you were saying about that inner journey, outer journey experience. And you already mentioned it before about like how that's sometimes what we try to find within our meditation thing. It's like, well, I want to meditate to be like a Buddha. I want to meditate to be like some of these bigger figures that you see murals of or paintings of. But deep down, like you want to have that experience, that rich experience of
Yes.
whatever
Yeah.
that goal is
Yeah.
or that big feeling is. This has been wonderful, and so I understand that we're coming to a close on our conversation. This is
Mhm.
such a powerful thing, and I really grateful for you to be sharing so much of your upcoming work, and I can't wait for it to be out. Like I think it sounds like it's very
Thank you.
powerful work. But I wanted to ask just a couple more quick questions, which are
Sure.
if you have anything that you would like to promote, and I know we're talking about maybe an upcoming Māyādevī memoir book coming out, but if there's anything that
Yeah.
you want to promote, get any eyes and ears on, whether it's a cause or a foundation that you're involved with,
Mm,
or if it's something that you've heard about that you want to share a spotlight with. And in the meantime, I wanted to share that you have a wonderful website, which is mindynewman.com. It is so well done, and it has information about your private practice as a psychotherapist and a hypnotherapist working in mental health. You have multiple Tricycle articles available on Tricycle that are like healing from miscarriage, the green-eyed monster, as well as you have a Dharma talk acknowledging the spiritual bypass. But if there's anything else
mm.
that you'd like to share, I'd love to hear about it.
I think that's really like it. Yeah. Appreciate it. You covered all the bases.
Okay. Well, for the pilgrimage thing, because it sounds
Mhm,
like there's someone that organizes your trips. I don't know if maybe
mhm.
this would be a good place for you to offer who runs it and
Oh,
if
yeah.
where someone might
Yeah.
be able to find that.
Yes. Yeah. That'd be a great plug. So, Dr. Miles Neal, his website, I think, is gradualpath.com. The name of his practice is Gradual Path. He is a psychotherapist who writes extensively about pilgrimage as paradigm therapy as a form of healing. He also has two books out. So definitely, if people are interested in those pilgrimage trips and learning more about like pilgrimage as healing in the Buddhist context, and then also my teacher Geshe Tenzin Zopa has a website. I think it's tenzinzopa.net. Let me actually check that real quick. I hate to miss the opportunity to not give his, or maybe you could check my
Yeah.
phone in front of me. It's TENZINZOPA.net, I think.
Okay, let me see. I know that they have a Instagram page as well. The Happy Monk, right?
Yeah, I don't know how often that's getting updated, but his website has he has a very devoted student who he has devoted students who transcribe his teachings, and they also include a lot of audio of all of his teachings. So that is a great resource. And also, but if we don't find it right now, people can just look up Geshe Tenzin Zopa and also the film about him, Unmistaken Child. definitely, it's very inspiring and beautiful.
Wonderful. Yes. Sorry, I couldn't quite find the exact URL for that.
Yeah,
But I think that if you're typing in the name will help people
they'll come
guide.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then but my second question is, do you happen to have
Mhm.
a advice for anybody that
Mm,
is walking the Buddhist path that you would have wanted to have heard when you were
mm,
first starting out?
yeah, great question. Let me see. I know what I want to say, but let me see how to put it into words. I would say to them, it's going to be messy. And that is how it's supposed to be. And that is okay. And, you might wind up in places that are very different than you expect. You might wind up with teachers that you don't expect. You might wind up in practices that you don't expect. You might wind up with people that you don't expect. And that we think we, at least I did, and I assume other people, we think we know what it's supposed to look like, but everybody's path is totally unique and it might look really different. You might wind up in a totally different path that what you think your path is supposed to look like, and that's okay, you know?
I appreciate that a great deal because like sometimes you think that you have a straight journey, like a straight through
Yeah.
line.
Yeah. Right?
There's so many
Yeah.
bumps and twists and turns
Yeah.
that make it exciting and fun, but also make it
Yeah.
a little bit more of a mystery. So
Yes.
I appreciate you offering that because it can certainly get messy in a
Yeah.
great way.
Yeah.
Mindy, thank you so much for speaking with me today, especially
Yeah.
before you go on your trip, and thank you for including me in your pilgrimage. You know, including me
Yeah.
in this conversation as you start to gear up for the actual movement of it. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing so much of your story and for taking the time to
Yeah.
speak with me today.
Thank you for being part of it, and thank you for asking me. I really appreciate it.